I have assumed, technology, of course, is going to be very important to the younger generations, but it turns out it's increasing in importance and significance to older generations as well. The number one place members of all generations will go to learn more about a nonprofit before making a donation is their website, then followed by social media.
Hello, hello. It's Holly Rustick here with the Grant Writing and Funding Podcast. And we are doing something a little out of our norm today, which is a lot of fun. And that is, we are going to be talking about generational giving. And to help me with that conversation is none other than our wonderful sponsor for the entire quarter. So you guys can be hearing about them a lot, is Bloomerang. And you guys have been our sponsor before. We do a lot of aligned things together. It is really cool to see you guys lifting up the nonprofit sector and really helping with funding on another level. We like to focus on grant writing. You all focus on donors. You all focus on, retention, all of that. And that is healthy for a nonprofit. And just because you're a grant writing consultant doesn't mean you can't do other things. So to help me with that today, I have Melaina Chromy, and she is the PR and communications manager at Bloomerang. So she's with me today. Hi, Melaina. Welcome.
Hey, Holly, thanks so much for having me. It's exciting to be here and to get to talk to your audience and grant writers. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Yeah, I was super excited you're here today as well. And yeah, this is going to be so much fun because we are talking about your report. I want to know more about your report. We're going to be sharing your report. And y'all, if you are, make sure you sign up to our newsletters too, because we're going to be putting the link in every single week for the Q4 to this report, because we want to make sure that you guys can get it. So we're going to talk about this report, but then we're going to go a little bit more into details just about generational giving and why that's so important for nonprofits. So this is the 2024 Generation Giving report, but it's not the first one you've done. So can you kind of talk about what it is and all of that?
So we first did this report back in 2020. And this was pre-pandemic. This was like February. Things were pretty chill at that time. We knew that younger donors, especially Gen Z, were entering philanthropy and had this reputation for making a mark. And so we really wanted to have data-backed insights to kind of quantify that. What do different generations of donors prioritize? What are they looking for? What are different generations of funders looking for and prioritizing?
Yeah.
So we published the report. It's a big undertaking, but there's a lot of really useful takeaways, I think, for fundraisers and grant writers alike. Then, time goes by, the generational makeup of our donors and funders changes, and it's crazy to believe it's been 4 years, but so much has changed since 2020. So that really was what inspired us, like, hey, let's do a second edition of this report, re-poll, resurvey, see how folks have changed with more Gen Z members above 18. We had more of that demographic to survey as well, which was really cool to see.
Was there anything that you guys had to be like, we just got to throw this out? It doesn't really even make sense, just because you did it right before COVID, and then COVID hit and it was kind of like the world changed. Like, I remember when I was getting my master's in 2007, 2008, like at that time. And guess what happened? I was studying international economics. Guess what happened? The economic crash. And they were like, it's like this until now. It was like, okay, I'm learning at the wrong time, maybe. Right. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, yes, certain things change, right? Like in-person events, obviously, big change. But communication best practices, stuff that people in the nonprofit space have been talking about and advocating for years, didn't change. Those best practices were just even more evident, I think, and relied upon more. And so, like, for grant writers, you need access to compelling stories. You need access to good data within your organization. If you're sending out more appeals, you can't connect with your donors in person, that storytelling ability becomes even more crucial. And so, I mean, I'm wondering what you saw, during the pandemic. I'm sure it was huge.
Yeah, we saw a lot of shifts, as well as, people were even relying on foundations that would normally give to them year after year, but then suddenly the shift in priority was like, I know we usually give to this, but we're going to give to education or healthcare right now because we see the
Yeah.
huge need, right? Like, so from the arts to this. And then we also saw, interestingly enough, which was good, and we kind of see this sticking a little bit, was more Gen Ops support versus program funding, which,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
just knew, like, you need to keep your lights on, whatever.
Yeah.
We don't need the full report of how many people you're going to serve. Like, we know you're not serving people right now, but you still need to function. So
Yeah.
that was nice. Yeah, to see some of that shift.
Really interesting too. So one of my favorite findings from this edition of the report,
Mhm.
we looked at how much different generations care about overhead.
Mhm.
And it's a sliding scale.
Hmm.
Older generations care about it the most. Younger generations place almost no importance on it when it comes.
Really? Because they don't know. They don't know nothing.
I
No.
mean, yeah, and I think what it could be is the cost of living impacting young
Yeah.
generations, right? There's more discussions on getting paid a fair wage, having
Yeah.
competitive salaries. And so I
Mhm.
think that these younger generations are more used to hearing open
Oh, I
discussion.
see what you're saying. I thought you meant like younger startup nonprofits. I'm like, yeah, they haven't
Oh no.
experienced overhead yet. That's why. Okay, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, no. That's, yeah, a different discussion. Because I was like, no, they don't know. Yeah, your first year, you're like, any grant, any money.
Yes,
And then
yes.
it's like, oh no, operational overhead is really important. So yeah, so the generations. Yeah, so how is that? So that's interesting to me though as well. Like, they're not as concerned about that in the nonprofit. Is that what you're saying, or just
Yeah,
overall? Okay.
not as concerned. So when it comes to making a decision to donate, and
Mm-hmm.
this could also apply to funders as well, older generations really want to know how much is spent on overhead. If they
Mm-hmm.
perceive that as too much, that
I
could
see where
hinder
you're
them
going.
from giving
Ah,
funding, making a donation.
yeah,
Younger funders, younger donors place less importance on that.
yeah.
What they're looking for are stories of impact, which I think is
Okay.
really, really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, no, we've seen that switch too. And I think that's such a healthy switch, right? And and that's what we even try to like coach with nonprofits is, how do you really explain your overall impact? Because sometimes you're so used to saying, okay, it has to be this project. So then you like almost like put yourself in a corner because that's the way you're used to writing, where it's
Yeah.
like, no, let's go ahead and talk about the overall impact and ask for funding that way. So let's
Yeah.
see if there's opportunity for some unrestricted Gen Ops without it feeling too Gen Opsy, but just transferring the story and the narrative and the detail, right? All of that. So I like that younger supporters, and I have heard this. Yeah, they're not as like, okay, well, if it goes to overhead, it goes to overhead, whatever. Like, as long as it's
Yeah.
supporting the project, like, which is really cool and almost revolutionary, and how
Yeah. It
quick
gives
that
me a
has
lot of hope.
changed.
It gives me a
Yeah,
lot in
yeah,
younger generations, and it's just exciting to see.
I
I
love
hope
that.
grant writers that, like you said, you can use this data to encourage yourself and like know, okay, I'm not pigeonholed into this strict category forever. I can kind of branch out, talk more about the mission and Gen Ops, like you just said, which is good.
Yeah,
I think that's a great
yeah.
direction to get into.
Do you think that we're going to see that maintained? Like, do you think that that's actually, because that's a huge transformation? Like, I might say that, you might be like whatever, like, people that are older may think a different way, people that are younger may think a different way, but those people who are younger will eventually become very, very soon the decision makers on how funding is, like, on the grant management side or on the grant approval side, right? They're going to become the decision makers on what's funded, and they are the decision makers right now in donations, right? So
Mhm.
do you feel like overall that's going to maintain that thought?
I think so. And I think it has to. I think
Yeah,
it has to. I mean,
yeah,
the nonprofit sector is facing record job vacancies
yeah.
because it's tough for them to pay at a competitive level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for the sector to really sustain itself and to be healthy and to solve all of these tough issues in society and in our communities, they have to be able to pay their employees at a fair and equitable rate.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
to do that,
absolutely.
overhead cost is just a part of it. And so I think we really have to get comfortable with that conversation. And, you know, that brings me to another finding that I wanted to bring up and discuss. And
Mhm.
that was just the importance of monthly communications to donors
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
are not fundraising related. And
Mhm.
so as we were kind of pouring over what we found, I think it has a good correlation to grant writing as well, because if a fundraising team or writing team gets in the habit of finding compelling content, good stories, and has access to good data on their performance, not only is that useful for the grants you're applying for, that really appeals to your donors too.
Mhm.
So,
I love that. It is. And you're right. Like, here it is, even with grants, right? What do you do to build relationships? Oh, I send out a letter of inquiry once a year and ask for money. That's not building a relationship. I mean, it's a part of it potentially, right? In how it's set up,
mhm.
but it's not the only thing. So I love how you're saying that with even your donors, you can't just ask for money all the time, right? Like you can have a call to action for it at the bottom of your newsletter, but like give some value, give some information, share what you're doing, right?
Mhm.
So do you see that like, even just like sharing new people who come on and like, this is an email we can talk about because there's new people helping that's a program manager, or we just got this certification thing, or you know what I mean? Like that's helping drive forward our mission. Like, like what is that kind of what you're going with this? Like share more about the
Yeah.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is a good connection back to operational um, costs, just the people. I think talking about the people at your organization is huge. And that's something that we can get comfortable with, highlighting those heroes.
Yeah.
Um, and I think just stories of impact. This can be difficult for different nonprofits, organizations based on, HIPAA compliance or whatever privacy concerns they may have. But talking to volunteers regularly, talking to scholarship recipients regularly, some of those direct quotes of the
Mhm.
experiences can be so, so powerful. If you put those in a grant application, you can repurpose those on your organization's social media pages, on in written appeals, and so much more.
Yeah.
So I really kind of see it as like a multi-channel effort,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah. That's what we talk about. We have something inside the academy, which we call the master grant application. And it is a thorough, like 28-page thing where we do all the research and find the needs for the nonprofits and all of the things, timelines, job descriptions, the whole bit, right? So you could pull from that in the future when you write grants.
Mhm.
But one of the things we say is this is a product and it is a deliverable that can be repurposed. To your point, just my research alone, we could do newsletters, social media posts, like all of that. It could be repurposed for an entire year, if not longer, with all the information that's gathered in here. So
Yeah.
it tying directly to the mission and the impact, right? That makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's information funders want. It's information donors want, and your
Yeah.
community as well. So
Yes.
absolutely, if you're putting in all of that effort into a stellar grant application,
Mhm.
absolutely repurpose it.
Yeah, repurpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can put it into those newsletters, social media, so much more.
Mhm.
And to
Mhm.
your point, like for donors, so here's the thing, like looking at donors, I think it's pretty well, for one thing, it's just a part of a healthy nonprofit, I believe, like to have funding. Like there's donors, fundraising, grants, right? Like those are the kind of the main. There's other things you can do as well, but they can kind of fall underneath some umbrellas too. Like you can make products and services as well, right? But like it's a big part of it to be healthy. Like I always say, don't just rely on grants. Like that's not a good strategy because grants are they're nuanced and they're kind of finicky, right? Because they're like, okay, just for a year, you can only fund this project. Sometimes, like, it's, you want some more unrestricted funding, which is
Mhm.
what donors can do. And that's not always unrestricted funding from donors. Sometimes you are doing a certain campaign to fund something specifically, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
do you see more people leaning into that unrestricted funding through donors then, or do you see kind of a combination, or have you seen any trends that have changed since 2020 as well with this new report?
I haven't seen trends in that area. I think that comes down a lot to how an organization communicates unrestricted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, in some organizations and for some grant writers, I think, that can be a big challenge. It can be a big
Yeah.
hurdle. It can be the scary thing we don't want to talk about. And for others, it's like, okay, no, this is, you can respond to the college's most urgent need, for
Yeah.
example. That's what our unrestricted fund lets us do.
Yeah.
Um, so it just really depends on the organization and how they're going to tell that story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Okay. So did you, for the overall report then, so you said there were some differences. What were
Mhm.
some of like, obviously, because we went through the pandemic and things just, so I'm so glad you did the report again, but what are other some like key highlights that you've seen in this report? Because it is important. There are more, like you said, Gen Z out there giving, right? And we'll look at even millennials. We have the Gen X, we have baby boomers, right? Those are all donors. We have across 4 generations. I don't think we've gone to alphas yet, right? They're not at 18.
No,
But
I think
yeah.
what's so funny is I was literally just talking with some friends tonight about Gen Alpha. Like their maximum age, I think, is 14. So they're
Okay.
not really
Soon.
here yet, but I do think they're going to eventually be very active. Um, let's see. Something that was kind of surprising to me. Um, I had assumed, and this is something that's fascinating about this report. We all have assumptions about different generations,
Mm-hmm.
whether we realize it or not. And so I had assumed, technology, of course, is going to be very important to the younger generations. But it turns out it's increasing in importance and significance to older generations as well.
Hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
number one place members of all generations will go to learn more about a nonprofit before making a donation is their website, then followed by
Ooh.
social media. So whether you're requesting, maybe it's a grant for technology or help with like your website, that is incredibly important. Your listeners can use that stat from the report when making a technology request. So yeah, incredibly important. We've also discovered that digital wallets have surpassed checks as a form of giving. So another shout out to or highlight of how technology is changing in the space right now. Um, those are two that come to mind for me right now. Um, and this is one that I don't think has changed too much in the last couple of years. Matching gifts just go really underutilized at most organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, only about 20% of donors get their donations matched by their employer. So
Oh.
that's something that there's a lot of room to increase that and just maximize matching gifts in general.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's like the federal government has a pretty good setup on how to do that, and nonprofits can enroll in this program. I can't remember the name right off the top of my head, but for that program. But you can enroll in it, and you can become a selected nonprofit that federal employees then can give to. And I believe they have a pretty good system with matching. But I think most corporates, right? That's where we're finding a lot more room. Or are you even finding that with the federal?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Something else that was interesting that kind of caught me by surprise is that most donors find out about a nonprofit through a peer. So it's a social connection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so word of mouth, despite how we're seeing technology change and grow in certain areas, who is still an amazing and incredible pathway to funding.
Yeah.
So, it makes me wonder about like the grant space and funders. How can people leverage their personal connections where they
That,
live through networking to build relationships? I think it's really impactful.
oh yeah. I always tell everyone, join a chamber of commerce,
Yes.
because those people
Yes.
are on boards. Like, yeah, you want to know all them people in the room, right? So, so good. Um, and yeah, and then there are boards on foundations, right, that are giving out funding. So it's like so good. But even just, I love that to talk about like even nonprofits, that makes me think of pull in volunteers, pull in like, hey, we want from our community, come like be a part of this thing, right? Instead of just asking for money, but like come be a part of this thing, because if someone can come and engage with you, they're going to talk about you, right? So that's that beauty of, because it is still who we know, like, and trust, right? So if we know somebody, then we're more, more likely to like them and to trust them. And like you mentioned, if people are going to websites first, like that was good data, Melaina. Because like you said, I see so many nonprofits out there with like the websites from the 90s, right? You know what I'm talking about?
It's not good.
Blue with the white writing on it, and it's all
Yeah.
scattered in like little clip art, like all like shoved together. And people will go there and they'll be like, they're not ready. They don't, you know what I mean? Like that would be an immediate first reaction is, unfortunately, you're like, but Holly, don't I need funding to create a website? But that's like where you mentioned grants. Why don't you focus on a grant to get your website and updated, and then utilize the stat to lean back on for the need, right? So
Exactly.
good.
It's
That's
a
so
impression for a lot of people. And it's not just younger donors, it's all generations of donors. It's how you
wow.
build the connection in your community. And it's becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, yeah. What about, did they say, was this report, did they say anything about, or was anything came from it? Because we also see like charity giving, we see our charity navigator, we see like some other websites that actually give scoring to website or to nonprofits, right? So are people going there before they give? Are they going to those types of resources? Or are you not really seeing that? They just go directly to the website.
Yes, that's predominantly among older generations,
Ooh, interesting.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's low on the list
Ah,
compared to website and social media and then peers.
mm-hmm.
So there's these more immediate places that, and I just think it's familiarity. That's
Right.
what most people would do. You hear about a cause, you're going to Google the organization. And so I certainly think that if you're working on more of a complex grant application or on your online donation form, having like a charity navigator or I believe it's candid certification can be very important and
Mm-hmm.
effective. It's just another trust indicator.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be remiss if I did not go back to emphasizing the importance of having an updated website and an updated social media presence.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that, pay attention first to your website. But yes, instead of making people go find you on Charity Navigator or even Gender Fair, Gender Fair has started also ranking nonprofits, and they rank as far as like women leaders, representation of females. They also do a pay, right, pay disparity and all of that, and they give rankings on that. So you can find these amazing ranking places, and Candid, of course, too, right? Where you then brag about it on your website where people are actually going as well, right? Put those stamps of approval on your website, the logos or whatever, to say,
Yes.
hey, we do this, and maybe a link to there. So if people are more interested, but it would just give like, oh, wow, they've got like these certifications and they're on these things. And that gives that trust factor. Yeah.
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 You get really good idea. Like we were talking about earlier, you're kind of maximizing this one piece of content. It's a trust indicator. So where can you add it? Website is an excellent idea. That's two birds, one stone. So I would
Yeah.
definitely ask for that.
Yeah, we just got certified for our academy through GPCI, right? So the Grant
Okay.
Professional Certified Institution. Yeah. So I was like, right away, I was like, put it on the sales page for the academy so people know that,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, I was like,
Exactly.
put that logo. They're like, okay, Holly, we got 3 places. I was like, I want people to know, like, you get a bang for, you get also, if you go through the program, you also get 31 credits. Like, that's amazing. So if you're already in that, you
Mhm.
can leverage it. So yeah, and it's so important. So yeah, throw those stamps, even in, I would say, their email signatures, like even when you get people on your email list, like if that's where what you're having them do when they come to your website, right? So you
Yeah.
can capture them and then reach out to them with different campaigns. Then yeah, you could even put those kind of logos in your email signature, right? So just to be like, hey, this is like another validation on that. So I love that. And do you find then when people go to the websites, like what happens then? Like, how do they actually become a donor? Are you seeing a lot of nonprofits then use things like lead generation as far as like join our email newsletter or just direct donate and collecting it there?
So couple things. I mean, we always advocate for making sure that it is super easy to donate. So when someone lands on your homepage, you obviously want to make it very clear what your organization does, but your donate button should be very easy to find. So it's one of those things where it's just the more steps there are in a process, the less likely someone is to complete the process and go through with it.
Right.
So something that we did when I was a higher ed fundraiser is we would get friends to try and donate. Okay, here's the homepage, very complex website. We got a lot to talk about and a lot to offer. Try to give. Do they get confused? Do they give up? Are they, not aware of where to go? Is picking an area to donate to difficult?
Right.
So when it comes to the homepage, there's specific things that folks are doing nowadays. So like if you have a special fund or a campaign, you can do like a pop-up banner or message that can be effective. The biggest and simplest thing is just making sure that someone can see your donate button or easily navigate there as soon as they land on your page. No crazy scrolling or searching necessary.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Like have it in the top part, the top fold of the website, all of that. And not too many call to actions. I see this sometimes too, as nonprofits are like, give to this thing, join our newsletter, to give to this, join this. Yeah, we're having a volunteer thing. It's like, whoa.
It's hard, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think most folks have this experience, or maybe I'm just thinking of myself, but let me know if I'm off base here. A recipe, right? Recipe blogs nowadays, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom. There's a billion and one pop-ups. You get frustrated. Sometimes my phone freezes, in the middle of cooking something, you're like, oh my God, I need this to be simple. Think about that experience as a user when going to a nonprofit website. If you see a need in your community, okay, this organization's helping. I heard from a friend. That experience to donate should be easy. A few taps, a few clicks. So that's really where technology is going, and kind of where we see the sector, just making it as seamless as possible.
I love
Amazon checkout
it.
process being kind of
Yeah.
the North Star of simplicity, right? Make it
Yeah.
as easy as possible.
Yeah, and you're saying that even a lot of people, you mentioned digital wallets, right? So that must be a game changer. If they
Oh,
don't,
yeah.
now that we can like save certain things, we can just like, yeah, add the credit card, you just add your 3 code thing and that's it. You don't have to add all the other things, right? Like, is that what you mean just by making it super easy, like
Yes.
online? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And digital wallets are one of those things that makes it easy, right?
Yeah.
I'm a terrible millennial. I actually don't use digital wallets. I'm like what they call a late adopter when it comes to technology, but for most donors,
Yeah.
it's Gen Z who uses it the most, then followed by Gen X, actually outpacing millennials, which I think is really interesting.
Oh, that's because we're just tired.
Just tired.
Everybody's over it. What's the easiest way forward?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just tap my phone. I get it. I get it. So offering that as a donation method or check-in method, whether it's like a ticketed event, that's going to be super important for nonprofits now and in the future, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was just at an event. I was speaking at an event yesterday and they have the Hoover app, right? So it was like super easy to communicate. Even that one's a little bit busy for me. I'm kind of like too many things. I was like, Facebook, I'm not a Facebook user. I go on there, it gives me a headache. There's games,
Yeah.
there's this, there. I'm like, give
Mm-hmm.
me Instagram. Make it easy, right? But that's where I'm a little different, I think, in my generation. But yeah, it's definitely these types of apps there's a learning curve. You got to download it. You got to do this, right? But when you have that, there's a lot of options, which makes it really nice. And just for like reminders, all of that, like we'll get ticket reminders for the next event, like it'll pop up. They can keep in communications and that sort of thing. So are you looking at, just different kinds of like even at the event, like I just show the app, right? Like, or if you check out on your phone and you get it emailed to your phone, the ticket, instead of having to buy one in person, like it just makes it easier, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
much easier. I mean, that's why companies like Bloomerang exist, right? That's like our bread and butter. How can we simplify the giving process for fundraisers and for donors so that nonprofits can be successful? Um, it can get, we talk about all these nuances. It can get, um, I think, overwhelming for some folks when we dive into, okay, clicks, how do I organize layout of my homepage? There's so many great resources out there to help. But I think what's significant to me from the generational giving report is that the best practices still hold true.
Yeah.
Powerful storytelling and frequent communication does wonders.
Mhm.
That's really what will build relationships and get our donors and funders feeling connected and supporting us
Mhm.
once and more times than repeatedly, I should say.
Yeah. And once you get a donor, and this is what I love, like even what Bloomerang does, I love,
Mhm.
looking at the back end of Bloomerang and all of the things that is capable of keeping that donor relationship very, very simple and very powerful, is also looking at how much work it takes to get one donor, right? Like to get you initially to come on, but to maintain that relationship and to then get, to increase the donor investment into your nonprofit. That's where I think a lot of nonprofits kind of miss it. They just focus on, because the initial process they set up was getting the donor, and they
Right?
forget the retention is where it's at,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah, so it costs, and these are such crazy facts for me. It costs an estimated 10 times more to acquire a donor than to
Mhm.
retain a donor.
Yeah.
And it's tough, right? When you're in fundraising, there is that rush when a gift is secured, when funding comes in. It's like, okay, we got the thing that we were
Mhm.
striving for. Maintaining the relationship's more gradual.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
it's a long game effort.
Yeah.
So it's still very important. That's something that we're always going to talk about. And it made me think of another interesting stat from the report. We discovered that 60% of all donors do not expect to be thanked for a gift. And
Wow.
that was a little sad. We were hoping it
Mhm.
would be higher, or I should say less, but I think it highlights significant opportunity for nonprofits. We have a big opportunity to really wow our donors, to make them feel appreciated, um, and hopefully close that gap so that there is an expectation. Yes, if I make a donation, whether it's $5 or $10,000, that will be appreciated and recognized. I think that's important.
That's so good. And that also made me think, because I've given to places, and here's the thing: if people keep me in the loop, I'm obviously going, like for me, obviously, I'm going to be giving to them more frequently. I'm going to be more involved in what they do, etc. If I've given one time and then I just get an annual letter in the mail or an email, once a year to ask me to donate again, I don't really do it. I don't, like, quite honestly, unless I'm really passionate about the organization. But it was just kind of a one time thing. I haven't heard what they're doing. I'm just getting an update once a year. I've lost the connection, right? And I think that's normal. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well? Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when we asked donors how often they wanted to hear from the organizations they care about, they said once a month.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy for fundraising and grant writing professionals to think, okay, well, maybe they've heard from me this one time. If I do it anymore, I'm pestering them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're providing updates on your work, what your organization does, and your mission, that's not pestering. The
No.
average American sees 10,000 ads a day. We are
Oh my
inundated,
gosh. It's
inundated
crazy.
with messages. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something crazy, like only like 50 of those messages are ads we retain at the end of the day or could rattle off to like a friend.
Wow.
So to stand out in our message and advertising world, regular communication is just, it's what it takes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
look at for-profit companies and how often they send emails and touch base.
Mm-hmm.
It's it just shows us how that regular communication is really important to be
Yeah.
remembered, to be thought of.
Yeah. We send a minimum of 2 emails a week. And when we're in launches, we send way more than that, right? So that's just for our regular communication. And people love it, right? Like people, they stay on, they want to know what we're doing. We send them high value information and we stay connected. They know exactly what we're doing. So, we send them the podcast every week. We also send them our newsletter every week that has like a good strategy tip in there, right? It's just like we're giving them information. And I think that's so important that a lot of people are like, oh, wow. But I'm like, yeah, but that's what we do as for profits and nonprofits. I'm not
Yeah.
saying you have to do it that much, but hey, it's up to you. It's what your cause area is. It's what's going on. If you're having a big campaign, if there's things going on. But just even once a month is like, to me, I'm like, that's nothing. Like that's
Yeah,
nothing
you're like,
to
oh, I can do
generate. Yeah.
that.
And you could sit down and say, let's go ahead and batch these emails. So even if you're like a capacity side, you're like already like, I'm at capacity. All we have is a capacity to get. Once again, that's not a really good strategy, as you pointed out, because you're going to be paying so much more if you don't have a retention as well. Like, and a retention can't, or strategy could be an email once a month, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Basically what you're
That
saying.
is
You could,
absolutely a
yeah,
retention strategy. I know we can think, okay, it's a thank you within 24 hours. It's a
yeah,
personalized call, which yes, those are amazing and they're highly effective, but communication about what you do, that's
yeah.
regular communication before the next ask.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just building a relationship, right? That's
Yeah.
basically what it is.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you can write like, I know a strategy that we use is every newsletter I write them, that Thursday email that goes out with a strategy tip, then my team, they turn that around into social media posts. So they use the copy there, they turn it in. Yeah. And it's just like, and then it connects and everything is, we're having the same message. And you can't think, oh, you're gonna like inundate people. I'm like, people looking on social aren't necessarily opening my emails and vice versa, right? So it's like, and even if they see it, they might interpret it. We have pictures with it and social, they might like get more out of it. Like there's a different way to say it, just reinforcement as well. And, if someone reads about like, oh my gosh, you guys reached out and served, 100 animals this year in your spay and neutering program, and then they see a picture of it on Instagram with the cats and something caption about you doing that, that's cool. You're reinforcing what you do, right?
Right. And I think that adds so much more value to the service that grant writers provide,
Yeah,
right? You put
absolutely.
together this thorough application with storytelling, facts. That is a massive resource that could last a whole quarter, that could last a whole year with storytelling potential for a nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with the help of AI too,
Yeah.
give it a paragraph, a page, break this down into 5 different social media posts from Giving Tuesday to year end.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that beautiful piece of research and writing that has then just exponentially grown in the value it provides for an organization.
Yeah.
Um, I know it takes so much effort. When I was in fundraising, I was just in appeal writing. And when I had to help out our grants team, it felt overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Look, we're
Yeah.
writing a report.
Yeah.
This is something that is very thorough. It's a big undertaking. And so I think being able to reuse those materials, and just highlight the stories that are shared will be really effective for funders and for donors.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, definitely repurposing the master grant application, like 1,000%. We've even turned it into, we have a Canva doc that we have in our program. So people can repurpose it into a presentation for donors, right? And for funding sources. Yeah. So they can go into board meetings and present it that way. And they have a visual look at it, so they have bullet points from it. So it's not like a huge document they have to read through, but you can pull that, repurpose it, just like you said, into social, into your retention and nurturing strategy of that one email a month. Totally. And that's such a good way. And then have they seen like when folks, I don't remember if you mentioned this stat or not, or if you have it, but when they have that nurturing that at least once a month, is there an increase? Has it showed like statistically, is there an increase in giving or retention in giving then?
Yeah, I mean, we have in the Bloomering Resource Center lots of different reports and statistics about this.
Mhm.
Um, and there's actually a timeline in the generational giving report of a suggested donor journey. So, say someone makes a gift or they volunteer, that's also a great entry point into the giving journey.
Yeah.
um, how long after and how often should you communicate with them? This is something that a lot of different folks in the space have researched and put good time and effort into. Um, Something that is kind of fun that we talk about are voicemail messages.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you calls are one of those things that can be a bit intimidating for folks. But what we've discovered is even if you leave a voicemail message and you don't get to have that conversation, people now with their phones can see the text from the message
Mm-hmm.
just looking at their phone, their voicemail box. Um, and it still can leave an impact and a positive impression, just knowing, hey, this organization called, someone expressed appreciation.
That's so cool. I love that. And I love that feature.
It's the best.
It's the best. It's the best because I'm one of those people who very rarely gets to checking my voicemails. You know what I mean? Like, but I like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, now I
Mm-hmm.
can just like quickly read what they're who's calling, and I love that. I love that you don't have to go back through. And once again, Gen X, right? We like the easy way. So, but that's so good is just calling, right? Like calling to say thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
I know people are like, but what about the capacity? All of that. But I think it's interesting because back in the day, once again, dating myself, back in the day, a lot of times of how you had to stay in touch with that nurturing, and some people still do that to this day, is or just to say thank you, is like to actually print something out, like create it and mail it, right? Are
Yeah.
you still seeing that as very, I know that's like definitely been reduced with email, but do
Mm-hmm.
you still, is that effective, or is that just because a lot of the thing it costs money, right, to do that? So what are you seeing around that, like physical mailing?
I think so. In the report, we discovered that email was a preferred channel for most
Yes.
generations of donors when it comes to how they want to keep up with the nonprofits they support.
Mm-hmm.
But I would encourage folks to have active data on their donor base, survey
Yes.
them yearly on their preferences, find out what people's preferred channels are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would just look at your budget for direct mail and for
Yeah.
what you're sending out. Is there a portion that you can allot to thank yous? If it's all acquisition, I think I would encourage folks to try and give one slice of that pie to a thank you piece, to a stewardship piece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just one of those things too, where it's like different generations, right? They have their different preferred channels. So a digital thank you to a younger generation, like a Gen Z or a millennial, may be more effective. It may come across their desk or their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But for an older generation, like if your donor base are primarily baby boomers, I think mailing a thank you piece is incredibly effective and is a must.
That's so good. Once again, going back to this report, like looking at the information, because it talks about the different generations. And I think too, like to your point, it also depends on like what your cause area is and what you're doing and who you're reaching. You may have more of a different type of generational donor, right? For what you're doing. But you
Mhm.
want to pull in all generations, of course, right? Because you want to keep it sustainable. So do you see any nonprofits that might be leaning on the baby boomers a bit much, but they really need to transition to other generations?
I mean, I think that that is just maybe an overarching sector challenge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, it's easy, and I mentioned this earlier in our discussion, it is easy to assume that certain generations have a greater capacity to give,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's easy to assume, oh, this person can make this size gift, right? We want to remain open-minded. And I think one of the big stats that got us really looking into this is the transfer of wealth. that
Mm-hmm.
we are upon. We're on the verge of one of the largest transfers of wealth in North American history. So estimated 84 trillion will be transferred from the baby boomer generation to their younger counterparts in the next 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So things are changing. Our
Yeah.
funders, our donors, they're changing. And I think it's really critical for nonprofits to, well, one, have good donor data, data on your performance and your metrics, but also know your donors,
Mm-hmm.
know your funders. Um, with that data, you can then begin to see, okay, do we have a diverse donor pool? Do we have a diverse funding pool?
Mm-hmm.
And once again, going back to what we talked about earlier, that diverse funding strategy sets you up for success. It's healthy
Right.
fundraising. So I think looking at your donor pool, if your donors lean older, it is important and I think strategic to begin thinking, okay, how can we pull in a younger audience?
Mm-hmm.
It's, for your organization's future and sustainability.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, and it's so important to have, to say like, okay, well, Holly, that's great to know this. It's great, Melaina, to know that, but how do I actually get this information? And I think, I know like Bloomerang, that is a great place to go as well. And I know through us, you guys have a link. We're going to have a link in the show notes if you guys want to set up a demo with Bloomerang to see the back end of how it actually looks and would apply to your nonprofit. But it is saying tech can help with that, right? Tech is a way that you don't have to use Excel sheets and try to update them and manually keep track of everything. Like that's just like, So there are ways that are very simple to be able to get this data when you get new donors, to be able to know, okay, who did I reach out to this month? All the things, like how much have they given? So it is, I know that that's where Bloomerang can really support a lot of people. So for nonprofits out there that might be thinking about, how do I diversify just away from grants and also into donors more as well, to have both, right? What do you think that Bloomerang like really helps them with the most in donor retention, let's say, or donor acquisition?
I think knowing your donors.
Yeah.
So with a great CRM
Mm-hmm.
like Boomerang, you can see people's giving history, conversation records, and that can even work for various grant sources as well. If you have a contact at a foundation, who did you talk to? What were they passionate about? What grant applications resonated and were successful? A good CRM can help you house that information and easily make sense of it. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked in a place where those records were all in metal file cabinets. And if you wanted to
Yep.
go find a donor record, you're sifting through, oh, so and so didn't put the file in the right place. But with a CRM, it's all digital, which means it one is very secure. And then two, you can see patterns, which I think
Right.
is when we can really become Einstein fundraisers. And it's not that difficult to either. It's the science and the tools and the technology are really affordable and it's at our fingertips.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love how, yeah, you can click through and you can make like, okay, I just want to look at this donor or at this area, or, also find other donors who have given to similar types of places, like causes, that sort of thing. Like it's a very interesting place. Yeah, there's a lot of what you can do with it, but you can keep it very simple and streamlined as well. And to your
Mm-hmm.
point, like physical or even on a computer in an Excel sheet, like if one person leaves a nonprofit that was handling all of that, the institutional knowledge of where that data exists or how it's done or all of that disappears as well, you know? And
Yeah.
that's just like with grants too. We say, if you got one person working on grants and they leave, what happens, right? What happens to all your institutional knowledge for your nonprofit? So
Yeah.
cloud-based systems are really, I think, the way to go, right? It's the way to go. Like if your computer crashes, it's
Absolutely.
still safe.
Absolutely.
It's still safe. Yeah. So awesome. So I know you guys are also offering this report during this time in Q4 of 2024. So
Mhm.
where can people find it? I know we're going to have links in the show notes, but if people are just listening right now, where is a good place to go for them to check it out?
Yeah, so to dive into the full report, you can just go to our website, which is bloomerang.com. That's BLOOMERANG.com.
Love it.
And you can find it.
Yeah. And once again, that's a 2024 generational giving report. So they're going to be able to look at all of that. And if they want to book a demo, they can obviously do that too. So, so good. Thank you so much, Melaina, for coming on today. This has been such a great conversation that we don't really talk about donors that much. So I was like, oh, yeah, this is going to be fun. And it was, right? But the alignment with grants, so important as well, as you mentioned, like there's just so much intersection between the two of how you can repurpose your grant applications. Y'all, like, even for you consultants, you freelance grant writers out there, this could be an additional service you provide and charge for, right? To help with, let's put together a newsletter based off this grant. Let's put together some social media posts,
Yeah.
like totally something you can do as a service offering. So, so good. Yes. Anything else you'd like to say before we close out today?
Well, thank you, Holly, for having me. I really appreciate it. And if folks want to learn more, or just see other free resources Bloomerang has, encourage you to follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Bloomerang. So
I
yeah,
love that. I love that. And thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being a sponsor as well on our podcast. Obviously, we love what you do and we're like, come on the show so you can talk about it more. And I love that you're leaning into this specific report that you guys have spent so much time getting research, developing, and such good information for you all folks to think about as you strategize how to actually retain those donors. Like
yeah,
so good. Because that's just going to save you money, y'all. And you're going to make more money. You're going to get more money for your impact in your cause area when you look at this report and apply the findings. So thank you guys for doing that research. We really appreciate it. Yeah. All
thank
right.
you.
We'll see you next time. We'll have to have you all back on the podcast again. Thanks so much, Melaina. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.